Sony and Paul Feig's Ghostbusters ended up being the single most controversial movie of 2016. For some reason, that movie's conception and release ended up encapsulating many of the political issues of the year. Now, at the end of 2016, the year where gender politics hit the mainstream, it's time to take a look back at the Ghostbusters remake. In this roundtable discussion, I am joined by Midnight's Edge own narrator supreme, Robb from the Robot Shlomo YouTube channel.
Thank you for having me here once again, Andre.
The other is a prolific YouTuber who covers a wide range of topics that many of you may already be familiar with. If not, check his channel out. I'm very happy to welcome Mundane Matt.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time.
Awesome. Matt, you've also covered Ghostbusters in great detail. Tell me, what makes the production such an intriguing one to you?
To me, I'm a big Ghostbusters fan in general, but this movie looked horrible from the start, and when they tried pushing identity politics as a way to deflect any and all criticism, I just kind of felt the urge to never let up on them for it. So that's kind of been a big driving factor for me. The movie looked horrible, it is horrible, but them trying to play up the sexism card as much as they all tried to do, and then watch it fail miserably in terms of box office results, has been pretty much a very major driving factor for me in all of this.
Now we have, for the most part, seen the movie, so what are your thoughts on the theatrical and extended cuts of the movies? We can begin with you, Matt, because you've seen the theatrical version before, and then only last night you saw the extended cut. What are your thoughts on the two?
I wanted to make sure I was prepared for this, so I forced myself to watch the extended cut. Theatrical is a movie that I wanted to see out of pure curiosity. I figured after all the stuff I had criticized it for, I kind of owed it to the movie to be as objective as possible going into it. And it let me down. And I'm a person who enjoys really horrible movies, and I never laughed. Really, I never really chuckled. Nothing got my attention in terms of being funny. It was just more like forced nostalgia in a very kind of surface level way. It just felt unnatural to me. Even my girlfriend, and I like to bring this up too, because we went to go see it, and she loves Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy, and she loves Paul Feig movies and everything. And we walked out of that movie, and the first thing she said to me was, "Can we get our money back?" And, and I kind of started laughing, because I could see the employee of the theater who heard that going like, oh, crap, here we go. If my girlfriend, who's a fan of the people who are involved in this movie, came out thinking like it's completely pointless, right? Like, that's not going to bode well for, I think, a lot of audiences. And then last night, God bless her, she sat down with me, and we watched the extended cut until like 2 o'clock in the morning. I will say we laughed a couple times, but it was only at the extra stuff with Chris Hemsworth. That was genuinely funny. That was the only stuff that made me kind of chuckle, because it was just done in a way that's so out there. It added to the already stupid movie that we were watching anyway.
Yeah, and as for myself, when I first saw the theatrical cut in theaters, I was actually positively surprised, probably because my expectations were so rock bottom that I actually did chuckle a few times. I didn't love it or anything, but it was amusing. It was relatively harmless fun. And then, when I saw the extended cut a few months later, as I've already said in my review of it, holy hell, that sucked. It was not only boring, it was infuriatingly boring and pointless, and just longer, and added more padding, and yeah, just bad all over. And insulting. What do you think of the scene where they talk about Bill Murray's character after he died, and Kate McKinnon's character says, well, he just didn't have the right stuff to be a Ghostbuster?
I know, that took me by surprise last night. I'm like, wow, could you guys be any more incredulous when it comes to referencing the original stuff? But I feel like that line was added in as kind of a subtle FU to the haters, to be honest. I feel like, the extra stuff they shot with the talking about YouTube comments and everything after the first trailer dropped, that was, also kind of a subtle FU to everybody. Yeah, it was so bad. It was like, why is it that you brought in Bill Murray, who, by the way, was channeling Walter Peck perfectly? I don't know if you guys caught that at all.
I didn't actually notice, because Walter Peck's character actually kind of made sense. He was kind of right. Whereas Bill Murray's character, he was just kind of a dick.
Oh, yeah, no, totally. Walter Peck made sense for being that, that level of jerk. But if you look at some of the dialogue, I think it was a couple lines of dialogue, and the delivery of that dialogue, it was very much taken from the scene where Walter Peck goes down, to the containment unit and was like, let me see it. Like, it's very, at least that was my take on it. Maybe that was just my brain trying to compensate for what horrors I was watching and trying to make it somewhat relatable. But it's also like when they go to the rock concert for the first time, and here comes out the owner of the theater, the manager, and he literally just does the manager from the hotel in the first movie. I mean, complete with the same eye looks and the same mannerisms. It's the same exact shot with just a different actor. And so that was the movie. That was the movie trying to, be playful maybe with the nostalgia, but it felt so forced all the way through. Plus the dancing sequence.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Like, it just Chris Hemsworth was, he was charismatic in that role. Why? It made no sense as to why that happened. Like, Rowan as a villain was so underdeveloped in both versions of the movie that we didn't even really know what the hell, why he really wanted to do this. There was that whole line, if you were bullied your whole life, now you will be the bully. Right? Like, what does that, tell you about what Paul Feig and Katie Dippold is trying to say about, nerds and whatnot, right? Because they were kind of calling him a freak show, and that's kind of the idea that's where Rowan came from. Also, in the extended cut, did you notice when he was giving his speech to the girls before killing himself, he said that, there's millions of angry spirits here that want to pester the living, mostly dudes. Did you catch that?
Yeah, because Paul Feig hates men.
Yeah, I'm like, I rewound it. I'm like, did he actually say that? Like, wow, okay. Like, this movie just gets more and more sexist the more you watch it. It was made with utter contempt, and that's what I think oozes through most of it. It was bad. I wanted to turn it off. I I can't do this. But then I'm like, no, I gotta watch it to the end. Like, I gotta take one for the team.
Thank you for that. Those are some great observations, by the way. I hadn't noticed all of those things. What I noticed was that the movie was supposed to be very pro-woman and so feminist, but all the women in it were a bunch of idiots too. Like, all the men were assholes, but the women were all incompetent. Like, for instance, this professor lady in the beginning, the one who was only in the extended version. She was embarrassment to college professors, men and female, everywhere for her sheer incompetence.
There was also so many pointless cameos, too. The movie was shot in Boston, right? And there were so many references to Boston in the movie. Like, in the extended cut, like when the ghosts break loose and whatever, and Charles Dance is sitting at the bar, and he looks over and there's a Boston Red Sox fan. And then he makes a joke, what am I doing in New York? That was a reference to the fact that they were shooting in Boston and, referencing New York. I saw a couple little things here and there that were referencing more to Boston than New York City, which I just thought was like lazy filmmaking. Like, you're trying to pretend the city is something else, even though it looks nothing like it.
Could be a condition for filming there or getting tax rebates. Maybe they had to throw in some of those references, like, yay, go Boston, just to make the whole thing worthwhile.
So let me just ask you guys, pose this question, because you said there are a lot of elements that didn't make sense. How much of this movie felt as if it was improv?
Almost all of it.
Yeah.
Every time Kate McKinnon got like a standalone scene in that movie, with the exception of the fight scene, her part in that fight scene actually to me was like pretty okay. I liked the way that they handled it there, but everything else she did was all improv. Like when she's dancing with the two blowtorches, and doing like just stupid stuff in the background because Paul Feig can't. He's like, all right, you just go do stuff back there. It will be funny because you're a woman.
Yeah, more or less. And the same with Chris Hemsworth. He also did loads of improv. Some of it was funny. Other things, it was just way too much. Like, for instance, when he heard a loud bang and, ow, it hurts my ears, and he was covering his eyes. Like, someone need to say that, no, there are some limits here. But no, they put it in the movie.
Well, what was up with the scene with Aaron and Abby doing their performance from when they were in high school?
Well, it was pathetic. That's what it was. Again, it was another dance scene.
It's the scene in the movie. It's like it's in the extended, not in the theatrical. It's after the first video comes out or whatever, the Subway video comes out, and then they're looking through all the old stuff. They're like, "Oh, look at this when we were kids doing this thing. Oh, if only we could put on the show. And then they go and they do this, like, was it like Protect the Barriers dance sequence and like this improv? They have like the black turtlenecks on and everything. And it's just like, it's really horrible. It makes no sense.
It's just sad. It's just horrible. Yeah, that's all
Yeah.
it is. Probably should explain though, since Rob is asking. Matt has seen the movie, both versions. I've seen the movie, both versions. Rob is with James Rolfe, so you haven't seen the movie at all.
No, I don't hate myself enough to subject myself to watching this.
So anyway, that is the movie that we got. But for a long time, we were actually getting Ghostbusters 3 from director Ivan Reitman, starring the original cast. Right up until Amy Pascal stopped it and gave us Paul Feig's movie instead. But we know what we would have gotten. Rob, take it away.
In a May 2013 interview with Larry King, Dan Aykroyd revealed the story for us. Aykroyd said, "It's based on new research being done in particle physics by the young men and women at Columbia University. The world, or the dimension that we live in, our four planes of existence, length, height, width, and time, become threatened by some of the research being done. The Ghostbusters would have to then solve the problem."
So that's the logline for what the original Ghostbusters 3 would have been. Would you all have preferred that movie to what we ended up getting?
Yes.
In a word, yes. In 2 words, hell yes. So,
Oh yeah, no, that sounded a lot more fun than what we got, because it was a continuation, not a I need to make my own thing or else I'm not going to do it. Blah 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 blah. Whiny.
Yeah, that's a short answer right there. Like, to me, doing a remake when it should have been a sequel and the passing of the torch movie, but then instead doing a remake, and for the reasons that Paul Feig stated, it's just an insult to the original and all the people who worked on the original and all the fans. But also, this little premise that we know, but to me that sounds pretty cool because it's obviously based on the Large Hadron Collider. Remember, when that thing started up, people were worried that they were going to make black holes that would swallow the Earth. And the scientists, they responded that, yeah, we're going to make black holes, but they will only exist for microseconds and be really, really small. So we're almost certain nothing bad is going to happen.
yeah, it's topical, it's timely. I mean, that's what a lot of science fiction used to do back in the 50s and 60s. It used to take things that were happening in science or in society as a whole and then expand upon it, and it used to create an allegory to a lot of things that were happening. Right? And you could bring a new cast in too. You know, you can have new recruits. The Ghostbusters could have been franchised in different cities. There's a lot of flexibility there with that kind of idea.
I will say, I will give the film credit. The opening little scene is pretty good, right? Like the whole thing with the Aldridge Mansion, I thought was pretty good. Only the rest of the movie could have been handled in the same way. Not the constant, oh, I'm eating Pringles during this horrific scene, you know. And then when asked, why am I eating Pringles? I simply use the line, once you pop. You know, the
Pringles
joke.
must have paid so much for that.
They must have. I mean, I saw so many product placements. Like everything with like the wonton soup stuff. Like, why is that a running gag?
That's always like the running gag in every Melissa McCarthy movie. I'm not one to talk, okay, I have a few extra pounds myself, but everything Melissa McCarthy does, you point and you say, and she falls down and you point, ah ha ha ha, look, she's awkward because she's fat. Get it? I'm like, yeah, you've run that joke into the ground. Why? It's not funny anymore. I'm sorry. What else you got?
I will say that, like, in, you know, Bridesmaids, right, which is what kind of launched her out there in terms of, you know, just her career, that was what they were playing on, the kind of, like, really over-the-top fat woman character, you know, that was very kind of vulgar and crass.
Yeah.
And everything. And that worked for her at the time. And then, of course, she went on to go do, like, Identity Thief and a few other movies that all tanked. Every one of her movies outside of a Paul Feig movie has tanked. You know, Spy was her biggest movie, and that, to me, also, I feel, was probably her just having more fun and, like, not playing up a specific stereotype.
It was also Paul Feig's biggest movie. And best movie, I have to admit.
It's like I've said before many times, is Paul Feig works in subversive humor, right? That's where he does his best work, or whatever you want to call it. Like, you know, Bridesmaids was a take on The Hangover, right? You know, The Heat was a take on all of the 1980s buddy cops, Tango and Cash, Lethal Weapon, anything Shane Black touched, essentially. And then this movie comes out, and you could tell it's like either Amy Pascal like talked Paul Feig into making it, in emails we don't have access to. She was kind of like hitting him up because didn't he turn it down like 3 times?
Yeah, he initially turned it down. Yeah.
So what prompted him? Was it just that like a friend calling and saying, "Look, if you do this, we'll give you whatever you want afterward"?
What prompted him, from what I can glean or infer from the missing emails, what happened is that when he turned it down was when he was supposed to direct Ghostbusters 3 as conceived and produced by Ivan Reitman. It was the moment that Amy Pascal promised him that you don't have to worry about Ivan Reitman. You can do whatever you want. This is your movie now. That was the moment that he came aboard. The moment when it ceased to be Ghostbusters 3 and it started being Paul Feig's Ghostbusters. When that happened, he was aboard immediately.
Because originally it was supposed to be Mark Webb, right, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he was one of the first they looked at. They were considering several directors until the moment when Amy Pascal decided Paul Feig is the guy.
I wonder if that has to do with the budget, to be honest with you. Because Mark Webb, coming off of Spider-Man 1 and 2, those were huge movies, regardless of whether or not, to arguing how much profit Spider-Man 2 did. But still, coming off of those, and Mark Webb playing ball with Sony and how much overproducing they did in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I could see them courting him for Ghostbusters. Although I don't know if he would have done any better of a job, to be honest with you.
I think Amazing Spider-Man 2 had a $220 million budget.
Yeah.
And $150 million is nothing to sneeze at, but it's significant. It's a bit lower than 220.
Well, Paul Feig also came out and made a comment about the budget a while back, basically saying that they only had like $80 million to work with or something. It was like a smaller amount because there was a lot of the budget went to paying like Ivan Reitman and paying Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd because of the rights that they hold.
Yeah.
So I don't remember the exact quote, but that was kind of what he was inferring, is that, again, it's like the video I did where he's like, he doesn't take any responsibility for what happened. None whatsoever. Blames it on everybody else but his own incompetence.
But the thing is that even if he only spent $80 million on the movie that he had at his disposal, still doesn't change the fact that the movie needed to make back a hell of a lot more than that. The movie needed to make back $150 million, even if loads of that was contractual and bumbling before he ever came aboard. Doesn't change the fact that that is a commitment that his movie has to live up to, and it failed spectacularly.
It did, and I think a lot of that has to do with playing the identity politics card. And you can see that too in the response that have come out of that, where people are saying like, "Oh, Ghostbusters failed and Donald Trump became president. 2016 is for racist white men." Like that's like, I don't know what they're trying to accomplish by making those claims. It doesn't prove anything. It's just I don't know if they're trying to just find a way to deal and cope with the fact that they're not influential as content creators, as writers. And I think that's how a lot of the media portrayed it, is they wanted to be the white knight for Ghostbusters. They wanted to defend this movie for some reason. And then when it failed to connect, they realized once again that they just don't have that kind of power over people.
What I think is that they see themselves as a cross between Jesus Christ and Batman, whose holy duty it is to protect progress and whoever and whatever causes they deem to be worthy. And they do it with such intensity and in such a manner that they step on many people's toes along the way. And what I think is really hard for them to admit, the thing that they are going to deny, speaking of Trump's presidency, their very actions helped bring it about. So that is actually the ultimate sign of the movie's failure. It got involved in actual politics. The movie officially endorsed Hillary Clinton. And then for like a moment, they took that tweet down. And then Paul Feig went back in and said, no, this movie supports Hillary. I'm with her.
They kept doubling down. That was the problem. They just kept doubling down and didn't realize that like every time it failed, that the more they keep doing this, the more it's just not going to work. It's one of those things where you just watch this whole thing keep collapsing. And every time you think it's done, something else comes up. It is the gift that keeps on giving because they won't let it go. It's like when the DVD came out and Paul Feig is like, "Oh, if they want a sequel, Holtzman fans got to come out and buy the movie. Get the movie." It's like, that didn't work for Dredd. That ain't going to work for you.
that the movie has sold fairly well in Blu-ray, but it's not going to matter. It really mattered in the theatrical run, and there it bombed big time. That's what matters. And if every person on the planet bought the Blu-ray, then yeah, of course, but not enough people buy it. It didn't help Dredd, isn't going to help Ghostbusters. And also, there's no campaigning for another sequel. Like, how many really care? How many websites are there? How many petitions are there for more Ghostbusters? And if there are, how big are they?
Probably not very big at all. Because I don't know anyone. I met one woman the other day. I went and did a ghost haunted walking tour through Portland, and we were our tour guide was this young woman, and we were talking, and somehow the subject of Ghostbusters came up, and she goes, "Oh my God, I loved it. I saw it twice in the theater, and I own it on home video, and I watched the extended cut, and it's even better than what's in theaters." And I'm like, "Really? I did not like it at all." And she goes like, "Wow, you're the only person I've met who didn't like it." And I just looked at her like, "Really? Really?" Yeah. It got a little bit better though too, because she's like, "I haven't met anyone who didn't like it." And I'm all like, "Oh, I didn't like it." She's like, "Well, I haven't met any woman who didn't like it." And then I point to my girlfriend. I'm like, "She didn't like it either."
Well, that's her day made right there.
You can't see me right now, but I'm face palming as we speak. I'm like, "Oh, you can't." She couldn't have said. She actually said that.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
She's probably one of those people who actually sent a supportive tweet to Paul Feig. One of those people that he says there are so many who does.
Participated in the anti-Trump protests the week before. So
why am I not surprised?
Exactly. Don't get me wrong. Here's the thing. Like, I'm making fun of her a bit. She was a very, very nice person, and she did a fantastic job on this, like being the tour guide. That's the downside to this particular movie is it's caused such a divide with people. It's like I have friends of mine on Facebook that are dudes who went to go see this movie in theaters, and they loved it, right? And they thought it was the funniest thing ever. They went out, they bought their Holtzman Pop Funko or whatever they're called, little things. They bought merchandise because they wanted to support the movie, and they don't understand why people don't like it. And I'm just like, did we see the same movie? Did like someone just throw up the original 1984 Ghostbusters and that's what you saw? And I saw the shit movie? Like, what happened here? Maybe it's just because I like you guys followed the production and the post-production and the post-trailer release nonsense, and we have maybe a different understanding of what went into this movie. We're not the people that have kind of come into it casually. Like, oh, what do you mean Ghostbusters is getting hate because it stars women? Like, that narrative that was pushed so heavily, right? Like, we know that's a lie.
Yeah, of course. Ghostbusters was hated for several reasons. That the cast was women, I think, was very far down low on that list of reasons. Like, if it had been Ghostbusters 3, if it had been an in-continuity sequel starring these women, and they had to pay rent, a commission fee for the Ghostbusters brand to the landlord, to Bill Murray in that cameo. That's what he said in the original movie. We're going to be so rich. We're going to franchise this thing. I think that movie would have been so much better received just because it was a sequel.
Let me play a little devil's advocate. I mean, do you think this would have been done as badly if there had been like radio silence on the part of Sony and Paul Feig's? If they just came out and said, "Hey, we're just making a movie here. Please, go see it." What then? I mean, what do you think?
It would have done better.
Oh,
it would have done better if they would have not played the identity politics game as hard as they did. The fact that like Melissa McCarthy went on Ellen and made a comment about that people commenting are just living in their mother's basements. It's very same. It's similar to the mentality that the left in America was pushing during the election of saying, oh, if you're a Trump supporter, clearly you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're a misogynist, you're a xenophobe. It's that same mindset that cost them the election also cost Sony a lot of money on this movie. And that's because at the time, and I really feel like 2016 in general for these kind of politics pushing has been an eye-opener that people don't want to be labeled these things and that they're going to respond. Maybe not in the most direct vocal way because, they don't have to, but they don't want to rock the boat, so to speak. But they're just either not going to show up or they're going to do something completely unexpected, if anything, out of pure spite. I know so many people that avoided this movie based on pure principle and gave me a very hard time for going to go see it. They're like, you gave them your money. And I'm all like, I got a student discount. So I know the guy that works at the front gate. I spent less than $20 on 2 tickets. Screw it. something to do with my girlfriend. We enjoy it. But it's like, at the same time, though, they would have had more people in the theater. There were only like 30 people in my auditorium for a preview night screening.
About this marketing and how they try to shame people into seeing it. You have to see this movie, or you are a misogynist, or you have to vote for Hillary, or you are a racist. That's doomed to failure. Not only is it doomed to failure, it's doomed to backfire. Because this is a pretty basic concept within psychology, because this has to do with attitudes and attitude change. If you are to change someone's attitude, you have to overwhelm them with facts and really convince them, to cause a change in them, to change their worldview, to make them see things differently. That's how you change an attitude. You do not change an attitude by throwing out an insult. All you achieve with that is that you get people defensive, and they get even more gung-ho about their original attitude. You were skeptic about Ghostbusters to begin with, and then the star calls you a basement-dwelling troll because you're not excited about the movie. Well, then you go from being skeptic to downright hating it and starting to campaign against it. That's what they achieved.
I saw that Graham Norton episode when they had the cast on and they were mockingly singing the Ghostbusters theme. I'm like, yeah, you're not winning any friends here. Come on, guys. They did themselves absolutely no favors. And we were talking about the merchandise. When I go to my local department store, I still see big racks full of the Ghostbusters toys still on the shelf. It's been, 6-7 months now? Yeah. And those things haven't moved a single one of them. So,
I love that they tried to fight back against all those pictures coming out of Ghostbusters toys being on clearance at Target before the movie even came out. They're like, oh no, that didn't happen. That was just an error at Target. Like, no, it'd be an error at maybe one Target. But this wasn't one Target. This was multiple Targets across the country. I will say, though, just in terms of the whole marketing, Leslie Jones in the beginning really tried damage control, and I thought she did an okay job. And that was when the first trailer came out and people were getting offended on behalf of Patty's character, because she was a black woman who wasn't a scientist, but she was an MTA worker. And they were mad on behalf of that because they're like, oh, well, how dare you make the black woman an average everyday, every Joe or whatever, or every Jane, and not a scientist like the three white women. And then she came out and she's like, look, we all Ghostbusters, right? And I'm like, okay, I like that, because that was clearly her trying to, quell the situation a little bit and be like, everyone can play this role. It's not just relegated to these types of people.
Yeah, she's the audience POV character, really.
I disagree a little bit with that, because the original guest Ghostbuster, if you will, Winston Sedimore, he was the everyman. He's kind of like my favorite character in that movie, because he is the audience point of view character. He's the one that most people can identify with. Like, okay, you're in a position where you just have to get the job. Like, yeah, okay, I believe in anything, just give me the job. Yeah. That's all they need to know, because, okay, fine, we see you are desperate for a job, you look like you're going to do a good job. You're it. Fine. Doesn't matter if you're white, black, whatever. You're an everyman. You just need the job, and you do get the job done. Leslie Jones, however, I'm not sure she was the everyman in that sense, because there was something more about the way that she dressed, the way that she spoke, a little bit of everything that was more, shall we say, in lines with certain stereotypes. And I think that's kind of what the criticism was about. In the movie, she was a surprisingly good character, I thought. But you didn't get that impression from the trailers because of the shots they selected, which were not her quiet, more reflective moments, but the really out there over-the-top ones. That kind of gave an unfortunate first impression of the character.
It did. And just also, I think when I saw the movie, I didn't really care much for her character pretty much at all. Like, Winston was at least relatable to an extent. Patty was just like, I'm joining your team. It wasn't like she applied for a job. She showed up and kind of barged her way in. Like, I'm going to quit my job at the MTA and come work with you guys. Well, we're not really hiring. No. You need me. I'm here. And they're like, oh, yeah, all right. Oh, okay, you're part of the team now. Like, with Winston, it was, we're hiring another person. We have too much work to do. And then there's a whole line, do you believe in this, and this? And it's like, if there's a paycheck involved, I'll believe whatever the hell you want. Winston's motivation for coming into it, it's there. Patty's motivation was just like, we need another person here. Let's just get her to show up and just kind of barge her way in.
That also kind of annoyed me with the movie, because, doesn't she need a paycheck? Because this is a startup company, and their income might not be all that much.
Well, and that was the thing, too. In the original movie, they got booted out of Columbia, so they didn't have any grant money coming in. And Ray, put a second mortgage on his parents' house. So he actually there was financial assets being used to fund their lifestyle, and Venkman, of course, talking him into it. But in this movie, it was just like, okay, well, we're getting kicked out of college. We need a place to go work. And it's like, okay, well, let's go to the Chinese restaurant because the firehouse is $21,000 a month. They never say at all where they make their money from.
There's no financial stakes, in other words.
No, we're not shown anything about where the financial stakes are.
And right there, you summed up what I think is one of the key issues with the whole movie, namely how Paul Feig failed amazingly to understand what the original movie was and what made it great. He made some comments to the Hollywood Reporter.
When the original Ghostbusters came out, I was in film school, and I went to see it on an opening night. I was 20 or 21 and went with my friends, and we thought it was the funniest thing we'd ever seen. I hadn't seen anything like it. To see a comedy done on that grand of a scale with special effects, that was a game changer. So for us, it was an amazing comedy. What I didn't realize was then, a generation after, younger than me, that it was a big deal for them. They would run around the neighborhood playing with those characters, and for the guys, that was a big thing. He goes on to say, I didn't realize that. I thought it was just for everyone, and it was this amazing comedy. And what I love about it, that it was this amazing showcase for a group of the funniest people working at the time, instead of being this thing trapped in amber.
Right there, Feig shows that there must have been something very wrong with the film school he went to, because he should have flunked the fuck out. Because he thinks Ghostbusters is just a comedy, showcasing the funniest people working at the time. Now that is a substantial failure to understand what the movie is about. Ghostbusters may be a comedy too, but at its core, it is about three men who lose their job, who in desperation have to form their own company. They do a startup. They have to risk their homes and their economic stability and fortune and everything to make this happen. They have to go out, they have to do commercials, they have to find their audience, they have to create a business to stay in business. This is a story about entrepreneurship. And then the supernatural aspect, well, that's there also, not as a comedy, but as the passion of the people involved. This wasn't some producer set-up project to showcase talent. This was the baby of that very talent, who made the story of entrepreneurs and the supernatural, and that happened to be funny on top of it. Paul Feig failed to understand that. To him, it's just a comedy. That's all he saw, just a random comedy, and he thought it was nothing else. How can this man be a director?
No, it's true. He was put in charge of Ghostbusters, I think, to check a box. I think Amy Pascal wanted a female-led Ghostbusters movie because she pushes more that pro-woman side of thing, which is not wrong. She has her agenda, and everyone does as well. But she chose the one guy who she knew probably would do it for cheap, and hope that it would work out.
And also because it's the one guy who would see eye to eye with her. Because we know Paul Feig's past. He's all about female-centric movies, because he has a very troubled relationship with other men, as we've seen in our earlier coverage.
Well, that's actually another good point you bring up, because if you watch the original Ghostbusters, it's three guys hanging out, too.
Yeah, that too, because what we get instead? Well, we got women dancing, and we got one woman trying to hit up another woman.
Paul Feig going out and rallying against Sony for not allowing Holtzman to be a lesbian.
I actually agree with him with that. It would have been more fun if they had just gone all the way. Like, due to Paul Feig's lack of understanding of the original property, it was never going to be a proper Ghostbusters movie. That was just not going to happen. For them, at least to make it worthwhile, they should have gone completely in another direction and made it something else. Make it the lesbian love story of the unrecruited or unresponded. What do you call it? Like
unrequited.
Thank you. This unrequited love story between Holtzman and Week's character.
Theirs was a love as forbidden as the ghosts they bust.
What's it going to be called? Slime is the warmest goo.
Like I said, if you're gonna go with something, go all the way with it. Don't half-ass it. Go all the way. Commit to it fully.
Which is something that they failed to do with Ghostbusters. Something else they failed to do was to be successful. Because as we know, the movie came, it bombed, and Paul Feig kind of refused to admit it bombed for the longest of time, and now insists that many people love it anyway. Matt, you had some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I did. I'd like to know who these people are, because I do think that they're figments of his imagination. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've gone to Comic-Con this year and a few other events this year, and I've seen people dress up as the new Ghostbusters, but I saw a lot more people dressed up as the old Ghostbusters. So I don't think his impact or the impact of it has gone as far as he wants. Because I mean, he said stuff like this line here in his guest column he wrote for Hollywood Reporter a couple weeks ago. He says girls have come up to him and said, if I had this movie when I was younger, I would have been an engineer or a scientist now, which is just such a really hyperbolic statement to make, in my opinion, because you don't know that's true, for one, and that's such an unfair thing to put on a director in general. It's like, oh, had they made this movie when I was a child, I would have totally changed my life path. No, you wouldn't. But he's still trying to play that narrative as a way to defend what he put on the screen, which was not good. Like, you get to the end of the movie and then they blow up half the city, but then they light off a nuclear reactor in this portal and it just repairs everything. Like, how is that even a thing? Like, in the first movie, Stay Puft Marshmallow Man shows up, they blow him up, and there's marshmallow everywhere. It's not like it goes away. Like, there's real world consequences to this event happening. In this movie, it's just like, oh, it's all good, except now we have white hair.
Yeah, did that revert, or will they continue to have white hair? That's the question.
And you know what? We'll probably never find out.
It's a Deus Ex Machina. They just, all right, here's a solution. Okay, we're done. And even if it works or not, that's what they do. They wrote themselves into a corner, and they just needed something to tie all the loose ends up.
But are we really done? Because we're obviously not getting a sequel to this movie. But still, Ivan Reitman wants to make more installments. What kind of future do you guys think the Ghostbusters have?
A good one if Amy Pascal stays the hell out of it.
I can see in about maybe 6-7 years, maybe a soft reboot. But I can't picture a sequel, at least a direct sequel to this thing.
I think that they're not going to reboot it. I think they're going to continue forward, because Ghost Corps, that's their primary function right now. They got the animated movie coming in 2018. And what I think is going to happen is that probably they're going to move from New York to another city, let's say Chicago, right? I'm just throwing that out there as a random. And they're probably going to set up a new team, right? Of a diverse cast of men and women. And probably Holtzman is going to show up to help them get situated, because that's the character that most people seem to resonate with. I don't know why, but that's the character people liked. And that's the one that even Paul Feig said those fans have to come out and buy the DVD in order to hopefully get to see Holtzman in a sequel. So I think that's the current talk, is that the Patty, Aaron, and Abby characters are done being the mainstays of the franchise because they can't, and that they're probably going to move on to a different team in a different city, and then just have it turn into a franchise thing. And probably through the support of the Department of Homeland Security, which is now kind of who they're working under, and then go from there. We're never going to go back to Venkman and Spengler and Egon, or Ray and Zedmore. We're never going to go back to that now. It's too far gone for that.
Yeah, but I think we can go back to that continuity though. Without them,
it wouldn't work right at this point. We all want it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like it's almost like the new Turtles movies. It's like they changed the origin of the Turtles movies, and then we as the audience are like, okay, fine, let's just move past that and never speak of that again. And I think we're going to get the same mentality out of this. It's like, okay, this exists. We know it exists. It's horrible, but we're going to move past it, build off of it, because you can only go up, and then never speak of it again. My personal opinion is that Reitman wanted this movie to tank because he knew that he still has the rights to it. He still has those rights. Same with Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray and everything. He can then, now working with Dan Aykroyd, kind of craft the stories that they want to craft and not have the interference of Amy Pascal. Right. And I don't know if Tom Rothman's really going to want to get involved in a lot of that, because I don't think he'll be there very long.
Sort of in a situation where Reitman's sitting back is, okay, see, I told you so. All right, now we do it my way.
Yeah, that might be it. He might have been like, look, this is why, because they still had to work somewhat with him. If you think about it, like, Reitman just kind of went with it, and I think he went with it because there was going to be the Ghost Corps creation that Amy Pascal and whoever else wanted to create the tentpole franchise. and they wanted to build off of that, and they just kind of gave it to him afterward. And now that he's running it, he'll be able to kind of do whatever he wants. I think within budget, maybe.
I think this very conversation is happening within Sony and Ghost Core as well. And I think the end result of that is we only have so much money to spend on projects. Let's spend them somewhere else, far less risky. Brand is too far gone. I'm not sure that we're going to get that animated movie in 2018. I'm not sure there's going to be any sequel. What I think is that the Ghostbusters brand is probably going to return at some point, but I think it will be resting for a long time. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. I think that Ivan Reitman, he has the best of intentions. He no doubt has many different plans of ways to bring the brand back. But he needs funding, and the people who will do that funding might see that the Ghostbusters is just a little bit too risky because the movie bombed just that badly. And is there really that demand for Ghostbusters that their money will be well spent doing that animation in 2018? I don't believe that's coming until we see the trailer.
Well, I'll tell you what I think is going to happen here. All right, I think what Reitman will do. Okay, so if Paul Feig is to be believed, and a large portion of the budget went to paying Reitman and Aykroyd for the rights.
This is a fact.
All Reitman has to do now to get the next movie off the ground is just waive his fees. Like, just because that's the next big thing in Hollywood is these stars are like waiving their upfront fees to get more money. I mean, that's one of the things that happened with Ghostbusters 2, I believe, is that the main cast took a pay cut in order to get back end points, and then that worked out well because the movie did well. And so I think that's what's going to happen is basically he'll be like, okay, here's what I have planned. Here's what I want to make right now. Here's what I want to make, whatever. And they'll be like, we'll do this, and I won't take an upfront producer fee. I'll just take back end points.
Yeah, I think that's the bare minimum of what's required. I'm not sure it's enough, but that's the minimum
start. If it works for Tom Cruise, it also depends on who they get involved. So, because remember, there was the talk last year of the Channing Tatum, Chris Pratt, Ghostbusters films. And so if they can talk Chris Pratt into coming over and getting involved and everything else, then, and Channing Tatum or whomever, or, just, it doesn't matter really, but bigger names than Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig, and they get them involved, and those guys come in and they say, okay, we'll take a pay cut because they're huge Ghostbusters fans and they like the script and they like what Reitman's producing and they like the idea of it all. Then that could do a reboot right then and there, and then just secure them, funding for down the road, right? And so that would be a way to get something going. It would probably be lower budget, probably I'd say maybe, less than 150 million, but they could probably do it in a way with those provisions in place that would set them up for success.
Yeah, that is one possible way forward. There are many possible ways forward.
Sure.
So time will tell what's happening or what will happen on that one. There was another person very heavily involved behind the scenes, namely Amy Pascal. Now, of course, Ghostbusters, that's the first movie that she was registered as a producer on, so not off to a great start. Still, she's already moved on to another project, one that she also helped to set up when she was still chairperson at Sony, namely Barbie. How excited are you about Amy Pascal's and Amy Schumer's Barbie?
I'm not.
I'd be more excited to have leprosy at this moment.
Now, granted, none of us are the built-in Barbie fans. Like, we're not Barbie toy collectors. I didn't know the first thing about the brand other than its existence before doing research for our recent Barbie video. But still, we can have some opinions about the movie itself. How excited are you for the movie?
Barbie starring Amy Schumer does not scream must-see viewing. Going back to the Midnight's Edge video we did, Margot Robbie would have been the perfect choice. And even I brought up the name, if they wanted to go a strictly comedic route, Anna Faris even might have been a good choice. But Amy Schumer... Yeah,
like the House Bunny, she played kind of a character like that.
Exactly, yeah. And this is just has me saying, why? Who thinks this is a good idea? Amy Pascal thinks that's a good idea, and only her.
Evidently.
I look at something like Barbie, and I you can tell that it's pushing an agenda right off the bat. And I understand the agenda is trying to push, female empowerment. I get that. Little girls want someone to look up to. I get that. Amy Schumer is not that person. Amy Schumer, her demographic is not aimed at the younger market that's going to see this movie. And it's not even going to be aimed at the kind of like pseudo market of young millennials that might be around the 15 to 20-year-old range that might go see this movie and might have seen her show on Comedy Central. You know, the story itself is tragically horrible. Oh, Barbie gets kicked out of Barbie Land because she's not Barbie enough. So she comes to the real world a la Enchanted. But then has to go home to stop her world from being taken over by some Gargamel type person. I mean,
yeah, maybe. That's a horror right there. Like, how many times have we seen this fucking concept that you have this established world and then a lead character is taken out of it for the movie? To me, that destroyed the Masters of the Universe movie by Canon from 1987, because you had He-Man and he was taken out of Eternia and put into dump water somewhere in America.
Yeah, eating ribs. Yeah, I remember that one. They were shocked that there were people that humans ate ribs right off the bone. And Courtney Cox was in that movie. Remember?
Yeah, her first role.
Oh man.
Hey man, look, Frank Langella as Skeletor. Okay, you can talk all the crap you want about that movie. That was good.
Actually,
that was good.
I love that. That was actually cool. And he did that movie for his kids. He says kids loved He-Man, so he said I wanted to blow my kids' minds and be Skeletor. So
exactly. That's one of the reasons why I love Frank Langella.
Yeah, that's the one good thing about that movie. But anyway, we had that same concept somewhere else. Like, for instance, in the recent Smurf movies that are now about to be rebooted, you have the Smurfs in the ordinary Smurf land with Gargamel and everything. And again, take them out from there and move them into New York or something. What the hell? Why does this concept keep on reappearing? Like, has any movie ever done it with success other than Enchanted?
Well, the fish out of water, is because the Deadline article originally reported that they wanted it to be similar to Big or, Splash, right? And the joke I made was, well, both those movies starred Tom Hanks, so unless you're planning on getting Tom Hanks, you're kind of screwed. But I get what they're trying to say with that. But at the same time, it's like we've seen those kind of movies before, and selling this, like, is Mattel really hurting that much for Barbie sales at the moment?
Oh, they will after the movie.
Probably, because people, I mean, I know people who collect Barbie stuff, but they have for 20, 30 years, so it's like those people are the diehards that are just going to want to get the collector's items merchandising. But this movie, to me, just screams like any kind of follow-up to Frozen that Disney's done, which is just another way to push merchandising. It's just a way to get more people to come and buy the toys. Unless the script is amazingly funny and Amy Schumer is able to go an hour and a half without talking about her vagina, then
she's co-writing the script, so I wouldn't count on it.
There's going to be some jokes in there about it. There's going to be subtle jokes about like flowers. Right, I can already tell that's going to happen.
Oh yeah. I don't doubt that one bit. But we're talking about the target audience. Like I said, I have two nieces. One is 9, one is 11. That's the target audience for this movie. It's not millennial. It's not a 21-year-old kid in San Francisco or living in Jackson Heights. Walking. It was a freelance graphic designer. The typical millennials. It's kids. If anything, this should be a CGI movie that can easily transition from that sort of toy world to see on the screen where it looks like the toys come to life.
You know what I think it should be? Instead of aiming for Splash or Big or other Tom Hanks movies, they should be aiming for Pee Wee Herman. Think back to that movie. That was also in a very clear established fantasy world. And I imagine Barbie Land to be very much like the world of Pee Wee Herman. And just play it like that. Like, do it straight. You have a concept, and you can do great things with it. You can do empowerment, but you have to do it by the way of satire. Just like Pee Wee Herman did. That's the way to go about this. You can make a proper Barbie movie that even men will come to see. Like, have Margot Robbie as Barbie, and men are going to be flooding in to see it. You don't need to market it to millennials. Anyone is going to go see the movie. Just do it relatively straight. Take the concept and run with it. You're going to do Barbie? Do it properly. Do it Pee Wee Herman style within that world. Put some Legally Blonde in there. That's what they should be going for, not fucking Big.
Isn't Legally Blonde just Barbie just come to life? Really? I mean, that's
but it's a good movie.
Barbie has gotten loads of flack for being too thin. What I want to know is how many women feel better and more empowered when you get someone with Amy Schumer's body type playing Barbie instead of someone like Margot Robbie.
I don't know.
What do the fans of Barbie think about that? Because I know if a He-Man movie was made and He-Man was played by someone like Jack Black or Seth Rogen or someone with their body type, I would not think, oh yes, a win for the ordinary man. This is male empowerment. I'd be pissed as fuck thinking, what the hell? We need someone with Schwarzenegger physique from the 80s to play He-Man and do He-Man right. Not these lordasses.
I wish we had a female on the panel here to actually talk about this, to give us a little bit more insight, but...
Yeah, we need to find a female Barbie fan.
or just a female pop culture aficionado, really. But it's really... I can't... I wish I could answer this better, but I really can't. I can't speak for that. As a guy, I don't want Jack Black playing James Bond or Seth Rogen playing Superman, for that matter. That's the way I feel. I'm not going to apologize for that either. I think the question has to be, are we trying to make a movie? Are we trying to make a good movie? Or are we trying to make a point? And to me, that's the thing with this Amy Schumer Barbie movie. I'm like, they're trying to make a point here. I'm like, well, okay, but if the movie is shit, then it's going to be lost. All people are going to remember is how bad it was. And whatever you're trying to say is going to be easily forgotten.
That surprises me that Mattel would sign off on it, because it's their brand that's going to take a hit from a movie not working. And of course, this could come out and it could be the best, smartest movie ever. Pigs could also fly, but like, possibility is there. But I wouldn't bank on it, and I'm surprised that Mattel does. Because with Amy Schumer, there could be some backlash. You see that already, because she has this comedy routine where she talks about how she's not attractive enough to get the hottest guys out there. So she has a history of getting those men so drunk that they're completely whacked out of their minds. They don't know who they are, where they are, and they're in no position to consent to sexual relations, and she still proceeds to have sex with them. High five! Female power! Now, if a man were to do that, there wouldn't be much talk about high five or empowerment. Quite the contrary. And that's the kind of thing that you get with Amy Schumer. And of course, she might not be like that in the movie, but that's the baggage that she comes with. And is that something that Mattel really wants to have the Barbie brand associated with? Because now Amy Schumer and Barbie are about to become one and the same.
Yeah, that's no better way to kill a brand.
Yeah, there's I really don't have much to add about that. It's just that a lot of controversy can be avoided if Amy Schumer can keep her mouth shut, and she is incapable of that. So we're gonna have fun, see where this goes.
Yeah, speaking of fun, Amy Pascal did not have fun when she was desperate, and she suggested a crossover for the ages, namely Barbie versus He-Man. Is that a movie you would have liked to see?
No.
Only as a robot chicken parody.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would depend on the script. You know, if they pitched an interesting concept, it was like, why would Barbie and He-Man need to fight? You know, like, why? What conflict would they have? Would He-Man be looking to like rape and pillage Barbie Land? You know, and then it's like they have to.
That's the movie I would see.
Like, I mean, I have to say that the rape and pillage, that's really more Conan's forte than He-Man's.
Barbie takes over Castle Grayskull, redecorates it, and then He-Man has to take it back.
Yeah, did like He-Man lose it in like a card game or something, and then he's got to like, you know, plan a heist to get it back.
I'm like totally picturing like all the toys coming to life in a Robot Chicken parody right now. Like I said, as a 5-minute bit, it would work. For a 90-minute movie, it would just get beaten to death, I'm afraid. There's no shortage of bad ideas in Hollywood, apparently.
Yeah, now it's going to be really interesting to see if Barbie is going to be the new Ghostbusters for Sony. And if it is, you can rest assured both Midnight's Edge and Mundane Matt will probably cover it.
Yep.
Mundane Matt, where can people find you?
Well, the easiest way is youtube.com/Mundane Matt. Or just Google it. That's another way. Good way. But I'm pretty active on Twitter. So yeah, just go to like almost any social media network, type in Mundane Matt, and you'll find me.
Rob, where can people find you?
You can listen to me at Midnight's Edge. You can also check out my own YouTube channel, youtube.com/RobotShlomo. I also do have a Twitter page if you're into that. It's at Robot Shlomo at Twitter. I'm the only Robot Shlomo out there, so it's pretty easy to find.
And as usual, you can find me right here at Midnight's Edge.